Did it have like a conveyor belt that brought it up?
We had a big thing in the roof of the barn that went the whole length of the barn. A big fork. It was like that.
Yeah.
And you'd punch it into the bale of hay and then take it up to the roof. And then it would push the button and it'd slide it how far you wanted back and drop it. But then there was just this great big mound of hay that you had to mow back and spread it in the hay barn.
Oh.
And you do the top. See, in the hay barn, there's a name for it. And then there was the next layer, and then the loft. And the hay would drop in the loft, which was the top layer. And we used to have to mow it back, push it back, and then tramp it down.
So was it in bales, or was it just loose hay?
It was loose hay then.
Oh, and so that thing that came down grabbed it like a...
Big bundle.
Oh.
And drop it. When it got a certain place, Dee would pull a rope, or I would, and it'd drop the big pile of hay. And we had to go up and pitch it over to the sides and tramp it down.
And then you'd get more. He would just keep coming.
And we keep doing more. We got it to the top of the barn.
So if it was loose hay, how did it...
what we called, it was a fork.
Well, how did it get the hay up?
It ran on a pulley.
Okay.
And this big, like that, was a fork. 2 big prongs down and had things sticking out the side. So you'd punch it into a bale of loose hay and it'd gather it all up and you'd run it up to the top of the barn and then let it go back as far as you wanted it and pull the rope and it'd drop it there. And then we used to have, they call it mow it away and tramp it in.
So it wasn't, now I think I understand. Wasn't a bale of hay, it was a pile of hay.
It was loose hay.
Gotcha, okay.
But it was in a big mound, and we'd put the fork in it and run it up to the top of the barn and then let it go back as far as we wanted it and pull the rope and it would drop it there.
So the loose hay came to the barn on a wagon?
And we pitch it into the first mow.
Oh, okay, on the ground floor. And did the tractor bring it in, or did the horses bring it in?
Either one.
Either one.
We used to do it all by horses, and then we got the tractor.
Ah, do you remember what kind of tractor it was?
John Deere.
All right. So it was green? Was
Yep.
it green back then? That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yep.
That's what we have. We have a John Deere tractor. It's green. So that's how tractors can be green if they're John Deere, blue if they're Fords.
And we had to mow it back because it would drop it in a bunch there. We had to mow it back down in the sides and tramp it down
to make room for more
and more in. And it was really hard work.
Oh, I can, and also
Dee and I used to do that all summer long.
Yeah.
We had a lot of hayfield.
Yeah, well, you had a lot of horses and
it
cows.
lasted all winter for the horses and cattle.
Yep. Well, from what I used to do hay, it was always baled hay. So the baler baled it in the field, and then
later on in life, we had a baler too.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
But to begin with, for years and years, it was all done by hand.
Nice. So the field got mowed. The hay was mowed with a mower,
and then raked up into long. They would call them windrows.
Okay.
You'd take your horse and on your big rake, the big rake long behind.
So like a York rake with hooks, or did it have things that turned, that raked?
But the way it was done, there was no turning. You'd put the hay in a pile and you'd stitch your big thing that come down from the roof of the barn into the hay and pull it up to the roof and then let it slide back. It was the big fork was on a travel thing.
Oh, like a pulley or a track.
And let it go as far back as you wanted to. pull the handle, and it would drop it wherever you pull the handle. And then we had to go up and we call it mow it back.
But with
To the
pitch
sides.
with pitchforks?
It wasn't a pitchfork. We called it the mower. And that's what it did. You'd pull your thing up to the top of the barn, let it slide back, then pull it down, and the two prongs would stick in the big bundle of hay, and take it as far back until you wanted to drop it. And then you'd go up wherever you dropped it and mow it over to both sides to fill in the cracks.
So the mow was actually a tool? Like a rake or something? What was it? Or did you just
The mow was just the empty space where you dropped the hay.
Oh, so the mow was the place. But what I'm asking you is, when they dropped that big bundle of hay, did you kick it with your feet or rake it with a rake?
Oh, no, you went up with a pitchfork and
So
pitched
it was a
back.
pitchfork, and those are the sharp ones. The pitchfork's the one with
Only 3 times
Yeah.
on a pitchfork.
Yeah.
And you had to pitch it back and tramp it down so you'd have lots more room. Because you couldn't lose the loose hay would be this high,
the right.
and you'd tramp it down
Ah.
so you had it packed down.
You can probably remember how damn hot and sweaty you were with all that,
We were hot.
and how the hay sticks
And
to
Mom
you.
was continuously making ginger ale.
Oh.
She made ginger ale. Don't ask me how she made it. I know there was vinegar and water and I don't know what else.
Probably
But it
ginger
tasted
root.
good.
Yeah, yeah.
And she was always running out. Every time we come up with a load, she was out there with a pitcher of drink for us.
Nice. Nice. Isn't it nice to remember those things? You could probably
Yeah.
even remember how it tastes.
They're unbelievable. Nobody would ever believe the work we used to do on the farm, getting the hay in. It was hard work.
Yeah.
But we enjoyed it.
Well,
You had to mow it down first, then you had to go out with your horses and the rake and rake it all into what we call windrows. Big, long. It would gather the hay every so far we'd go. We'd pull the handle. We had a row of hay, maybe from here to across the street. And then you'd bunch it up. You either stacked it and then stuck your fork in it that you pulled out of the roof
Yep.
into the big pile of hay, and it would take it up to the roof of the barn, and you'd let it pull the handle and let it run back. Began filling the far end first.
So if you look at the front of a barn, some barns have this big post that's at the peak of the roof that sticks out
Yep.
with like a pulley on it. Is that it? And so that's actually part of the system that it comes right out of the barn and reaches down. That's
Exactly.
very, very cool. Because
And
I
you
see
did
that,
put
but
this great big fork, just 2 prongs on it, into that pile of hay down there, and yank the handle, which would tighten it up on the bale on what a hay, loose hay,
Yep.
and then you'd pull it up to the top of the barn and run it back on the pulley to where you wanted it and drop it, open it, and it would drop there. And then we had to go up there and spread it.
And
then
so-
you always had to keep, it had to be trampled down or the loose hay would pile up fast.
Yeah, airspace. So to get it to your animals in the winter, what did you do?
We went up and pitched it down in the loft and carried it in by forkfuls to the cows.
Ah.
The horses and the cows. We had a lot of cows then.
Yeah, yeah. I remember the milking room and the stainless steel milk cans with covers and cream separator things and all that.
And there was a big cement, well, it was a cement trough. It was just a big cement thing that was full of water. And
Okay.
you'd set your milk cans in there. And of course it was winter. It kept the water very cold and would keep the milk.
Ah.
There was a lot of work on the farm.
I guess so. And did you guys have to milk your cows by hand?
We did for years. And you know me, I was dying to learn to milk. And my dad told me, he said, no, you go so slow you're going to dry up the cows. If you don't know how to milk and get the milk out fast, the cows don't release all the milk.
And they stop
And
making
it dries up the cows.
Oh,
He
gee.
used to tell me he'd be still eating his supper, and I'd be out in the cow barn trying to.
Get a party going.
How many times he caught me at it and told me, "Don't let me catch you doing that again. You're drying up all the cows," because I was so slow. You have to milk them fast.
Uh-huh.
You can't just piddle around.
That's so funny.
And my dad used to have a fit when Gwen was missing at the supper table. "Don't tell me that little hellion went to the barn again." And out he come. Say, "How many times have I told you, young lady, not to do that?" But I like to do it, Dad. No, you're drying up all the cows, because if you don't milk a cow fast, they retain their milk. They won't let it down.
Yeah, it's supply and demand. They only make as much as you take. And I think I know what you mean.
And he was always having a fit that I was drying up the cows.
That's so
They
funny.
wouldn't have milk to release.
That's so funny. And
So
you had
Gwen's been at it again.
workhorses, right?
Oh yeah,
Nice.
I loved that. Was my job. Get the horses way back in the pasture in the morning, and they always were at the far end, way over on the new roadside, and I'd have to go back and get them.
Well, they probably were pretty smart. They knew they had work in the morning, so if they stayed far away, that gave them an extra half hour before you got them up out of the field.
That's exactly what they did.
They're not dumb animals. I think they're pretty smart.
But I learned a lot.
Yeah.
Of course, it's no good to me now, but at that time I knew what I was doing. I did it right, or my dad was on my case.
Yep.
And don't you let me, he'd come out, get up from the supper table and come out to the cow barn. And I'd be sitting there trying to learn how to milk a cow. And something about milking a cow, if you don't keep moving, you dry them up.
Yep.
And they don't release their milk.
Yep.
He said to my mother, "Nina, she's drying up all the cows out there fiddling around." He come out and he said, "Get out of there, young lady, and don't you let me catch you out here again." "Okay, Dad."
So what did you guys do with all the milk?
Huh?
What did you do with all your milk?
Those big milk cans, remember the big silver-colored milk cans?
Yeah, and they had caps, yeah.
And then every night we'd fill maybe 2 of those big cans after we milked the cows and put them in the milk can, set them in that big tub. It was a cooler.
Yeah.
And then in the morning, the milk truck would come by and take the big things out, milk cans, and put them in the truck and take them to the factory.
Oh,
the
so you
buttermilk-
sold the
butter
milk.
Factory.
You sold the milk. And of course kept
Well,
enough.
that was their livelihood. They lived on the checks
Yeah.
that they got from the milk. That was
Ah.
there's no other source of money on the farm.
Gotcha.
It was the milk check that paid our bills and bought
Gotcha.
our food.
Gotcha. And you kept enough milk for yourselves, right?
Oh,
Much
yeah,
as your
we
family
always
could
had
drink.
plenty of milk.
And made your own butter and all that?
Made our own butter.
Nice.
Yep. It was a lot of work, and I guess nowadays people would never believe it.
Well, their schedules are different. I think in your farming day while you were young, your day was longer and you had time to do everything. And you had to do things on a certain schedule. You had to grow in the summer, and milk twice a day. So I think the schedule was different. It wasn't like you got in your car and you went for 8
And
hours.
in our milk house, that little building out next to the road, there was a big vat that we kept full of water. And when my dad got, the ice house was in the back of the horse barn.
Uh-huh.
There was a room, and it was filled with sawdust.
Oh,
So they cut the big squares of ice in the beginning of winter.
Yeah.
Or sometime during the winter. Cut these big squares, blocks of ice, and fill the ice house. And you'd put one of those big squares of ice in the tank of water in the milk house, set your milk can in there, because the milk is warm when you milk it.
Yep.
You'd set your milk can in there and put a big block of ice in there, and your milk was cold all the time.
Oh,
till
so it
went-
kept it
And
fresh.
in the morning, the milk truck come and picked up the cans of milk and took it to the butter factory.
You know, I never thought about that. I never thought about milk coming out of the cow and having to be cold. Of course, we buy milk and it's cold, but it never occurred to me that that was one of the steps of selling milk, was that you had to cool it.
You had to keep it cool.
Yeah, or it would
'Cause
spoil.
it would sour overnight if you didn't keep it
Ah,
cool.
yeah.
It would
Isn't
turn
that-
sour.
Isn't that something? I never even thought of it.
And my dad used to test the milk every morning before he put down the milk truck to make sure none of it had turned,
Yeah,
started getting sour.
yeah, yeah.
Because if you leave it warm for very long, it turns sour.
Well, I imagine, especially in like August, you know, when it was hot.
All summer long.
Yeah.
Yep. There was a lot of work to it. And every once in a while, my dad would make a big batch of butter on the farm. But the milk that you milk from the cow won't make butter. It's got to be the cream off the top of it.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
You can't use the whole
Yeah,
milk.
butter fat, yeah.
Just the top, just the
Yep.
cream.
Yep, yep.
And he knew just how much to draw off every can to put in the butter.
Oh, yeah, that would just be instinct after a while.
And then you'd get the butter and you churn it and make your butter we used.
Nice, nice. Boy,
I don't think we ever bought a pound of butter till I probably was maybe 13, 15 years old.
yeah. Well, you told me when you were a teenager that somebody invented oleomargarine, and it used to be white.
But my dad was 100% against that because that sent the price of our milk per hundredweight way down.
Yep.
If you can use a substitute, you don't bother saving your cream, and cream's expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And that is what you make butter out, is the cream off the top of the
Right. Right.
milk.
Well,
You let it set overnight. Well, our milk cans you couldn't see through, but there'd be probably that much cream on the top of those big, big tans.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what you made butter out of.
Yum, yum.
And you churned that until you blew in the face. You kept churning
Yeah,
that
because it
up
gets harder
down.
and harder and stiffer and stiffer.
We made our own butter for years.
Do you remember if your mother had any use? Because after you make butter, you have the whey. You have that liquid whey. Do you know if she used that for anything? Because it doesn't taste good. It's kind of milky
Well,
color and kind of gray.
What is left of the milk, the top of it is the cream that makes the butter.
Right.
And the rest they used to feed to the little calves
Oh.
and the little pigs and things
Okay.
like that.
Yep. So,
They used every inch of it.
yeah, I'll bet.
We used to have to slop the little pigs with milk when they're growing.
Yep.
And the calves too. Once
Gotcha.
they get grown up, then you just give it to them any old way.
Yep.
But there was a lot of work involved.
Oh, man. All manpower.
Exactly.
Well, here's
But it was just a routine of things you had to do every day.
Yeah. And
Now you'd think they were crazy if someone told you to go out and churn your own butter.
well, a lot of people still do. You know, they'll raise a couple of cows, you know, on a small
I imagine
hobby
there are.
farm, and they'll do their own stuff.
I'm sure.
I'm just thankful that we still have farms and cows, and we can get cream and butter. You know, even though it's large scale. You know, now the milk herds are very large and everything's done in factories. It still is nice to have fresh milk, fresh cream, fresh butter. You know what I mean?
It's the best.
Yeah. So, well, we don't want to have any animals on the farm, but we want to grow stuff. And, you know, by growing stuff, we'll be able to get the animal products we need. We just don't
Right.
want to grow
Right.
and process them ourselves.
They don't do that anymore, I'm
No.
sure.
No.
You know, milk the cows and
Some
skim the
people do.
cream and-
Young people who are young and have energy and are doing their own thing called homesteading. They want to get back to that. They want people to know how to do it and be able to feed themselves.
But they don't realize what hard work they're getting into.
Right. Well, if it's just two people and one cow, it's manageable. You know what I mean?
Well, one cow would take you a month to get a quart of milk.
Yeah,
If you
exactly.
churn into butter.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Because you don't churn the whole milk. You let it settle and then just skim the cream off.
Yep.
And then churn it with it and then churn.
It's really funny too because you would think that the cream would be heavier than the milk because it seems more dense. Isn't that
Comes
funny?
to the top.
Because of the butter fat. It floats, you know, just like oil floats on water.
Comes to the top.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you remember all those things.
Oh my
those
God, yes.
Those are precious
People
memories.
wouldn't believe things like that.
Yeah.
How you skim the cream off the top of a can of milk.
Well, any country person would. It's the city
Yeah.
people
Oh, yeah.
who've never experienced it who wouldn't know. But anybody who grew up in or near the country would know that.
They'd say you're crazy.
And your friends here that are your age are the people who will know and remember that kind of thing.
Yep.
Because their families had to do the same thing.
Exactly. Everybody did it.
Right.
In the
That's-
country. Everybody.
Yep. Yep. Grew their own food and everything.
The truck came every morning and took the milk cans of milk out of the cooler in the milk house, put them on that and took those cans of milk to the factory.
Yep.
We had no way of using up all that milk.
Yep.
But so the milk truck would come by and take all that up to the butter factory.
Yeah. What city or what town was the milk place in? Where did it have?
Constable.
It went to Constable? They had their own milk processing plant in Constable? Oh,
Yeah.
that's nice. I didn't know that.
Of course, that's been gone since, well, what am I, 97, 98, whatever.
95.
Oh, I'm more than that.
95 in a couple of months. You turned 95 in September, and now this is December. So
Well,
September,
this is when I was a little
October,
girl.
November, December. Yep.
So that's like 80 years ago or more.
Yep. So 1920s.
Yeah.
Good times, good times.
But that was going on for years before I was even born.
Yep.
And there was never any question asked. We knew what we had to do.
Yep.
It wasn't a question, or can I do that tomorrow, or we knew it had to be done, the milk process twice a day, morning and night.
Yep. Yeah, because the animals can't do it for themselves. That's the other understanding is the animal husbandry.
And on the other hand, you had to buy.
Here comes Danny. Hi,
How are
Danny.
you?
Hello.
Oh boy, look at you.
Oh, you're a good man,
Hola.